Tonight, gripped with grief, 2 Edmonton police officers shot and killed in the line of duty. The shock and sorrow for the fallen constables.
Really an unthinkable and a horrific tragedy.
A devastating end to what began as a call for a domestic dispute. Newly released video of a Russian fighter jet dumping fuel on an American drone.
We felt that it was important to provide this imagery.
The footage and the fallout. Plus, a birthday bash for the ages. Yay! 111 and going strong. Life lessons from a Montreal matriarch.
There's always something you want to see.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. Every single day, tens of thousands of first responders show up to work bound by a selfless sense of duty to protect public safety. Today, 2 of them did not make it back home. 35-year-old Edmonton Constable Travis Jordan and his colleague, Constable Brett Ryan, who was about to become a father for the first time, were shot dead early this morning as they responded to a domestic disturbance. 7 officers have died in the line of duty across Canada since last September. CTV's Alberta Bureau Chief Bill Fortier tonight on how the men are being remembered and what led to the deadly confrontation.
Their faces bear the unmistakable expression of grief as these Edmonton police officers stand guard while the bodies of 2 brothers pass by. Hours earlier, before daylight, 2 constables responded to a call for a domestic dispute at this apartment complex. As they approached the suite, 35-year-old Constable Travis Jordan and 30-year-old Constable Brett Ryan were shot and killed. Police say the 2 officers didn't even have time to return fire.
These people were doing their job. This is unthinkable. It's unimaginable.
Friends of Constable Ryan say he was a dedicated officer, husband, and soon-to-be father.
You know, we celebrated when he got married, and, we just recently celebrated his announcement that he was expecting.
According to police, the 16-year-old suspect also shot his own mother before killing himself. His mother was taken to hospital with life-threatening injuries and was later upgraded to serious but stable condition. The loss is being felt across the city, the province, and the country.
As a former police officer myself, this hits very close to home. So to all my brothers and sisters out there, my heart is with you.
Today is a very difficult and sad day. Every single day, police officers put their lives at risk to help protect the public.
The last several months have been especially dangerous for Canadian police. Before today, 5 officers had already been killed while on duty since last September, 4 in Ontario and 1 in BC.
The ongoing battle of total lack of respect for human life. It's a very sad commentary.
Tonight, flags are at half-mast across Alberta, and members of the public are also finding ways to honor the 2 men who died while doing their jobs.
It's a sad day for your families and our families. It's a sad day for everyone in Edmonton.
This is the first time the Edmonton Police Service has lost 2 officers in the same day. In fact, the last 2 on-duty deaths were 8 and 33 years ago. So doubtlessly this is the darkest day in the service's history. Bill Fortier, CTV News, Edmonton.
1 person is missing and 9 others were sent to hospital after fire ripped through a historic building turned condo in Old Montreal.
There were flames coming out the windows. There were several people trapped in windows on the roof.
More than 120 firefighters rescued victims and battled flames. The heat and smoke so intense, surrounding homes had to be evacuated. The fire is now out. The cause under investigation. Poland has become the first NATO member to commit fighter jets to Ukraine. Polish president announced 4 Soviet-designed MiG-29s would be handed over to Ukraine in the next few days. with more to follow. In response, Washington said today it had no plans to offer Kyiv fighter jets of its own. And the Pentagon has released dramatic new images it claims led to the downing of a multi-million-dollar American surveillance drone. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malvin with a first look at the aerial crash.
42 seconds of stunning video. Through the crosshairs of a U.S. surveillance drone, a Russian fighter jet sprays thick plumes of fuel. An even closer pass dumps more fuel on the drone before the video cuts out. You don't see the collision, but when the camera recovers, there's a bent blade on the propeller. Serious enough damage, the drone crashed deep into the Black Sea.
Given the reckless and dangerous behavior, and to demonstrate publicly what type of actions the Russians had taken, we felt that it was important to provide this imagery.
The video doesn't lie, says the U.S. military, contradicting the Kremlin's claim there was no collision.
No serious person would believe for a second that this was accidental. This is the same military that are committing war crimes every day in front of us.
This former U.S. Army general says it's clear this was no rogue pilot. The order for aggressive action in the air, he says, had to come from top Russian leaders.
But we are pretty confident that at very high levels inside the Ministry of Defense, this is about them staking their claim to what they consider Russian airspace.
Ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, the Kremlin insists the airspace over the Black Sea is theirs. The U.S. flatly rejects that, officials resuming communications with Moscow with a message of their own.
And we will continue to exercise our rights in international airspace. Clearly, we do not seek armed conflicts with Russia.
Tonight, the U.S. believes the Russians may have recovered part of that drone, but the U.S. military insists they won't find anything, confident that any intelligence was wiped clean, Omar.
All right, Joy, thanks. Nearly a dozen of the biggest U.S. banks are banding together to rescue a California-based financial institution from becoming the third bank to fail in less than a week. J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, and 7 others are pledging a $30 billion U.S. rescue package for First Republic Bank. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen welcomed the move.
I can reassure the members of the committee that our banking system is sound and that Americans can feel confident that their deposits will be there when they need them.
No reassurances today from the French president, who used a constitutional tool to force controversial changes to the retirement age without calling a vote in the lower house of parliament. That fanned the flames of outrage in the capital tonight as fires burned in the City of Light. CTV's chief international correspondent Paul Workman on the frustration and the fury.
French politicians weren't allowed a vote on pension reform, so they broke into contemptuous song instead. A rowdy and raucous chorus of the French national anthem, which all but drowned out the Prime Minister when she tried to speak. So afraid of losing a vote on retirement age, she invoked a clause of the French Constitution to ram it through. We cannot gamble on the future of our pensions, she announced, straining to be heard above the heckling. Heckling and anger that tonight moved outside to Place de la Concorde, where incidentally Marie Antoinette lost her head, perhaps a warning of much more street anger to come.
Injuste, mal préparé.
This reform is an extraordinary confession of weakness, declared the far-right leader Marine Le Pen. The French love their retirement at the age of 62, and for weeks took to the streets in massive numbers to keep it that way. In recent days, a strike by garbage workers has added a whiff of annoyance to clogged and smelly streets. Through it all, French President Emmanuel Macron stubbornly and defiantly resisted, warning that France has to change or go broke. And today his plan to raise retirement to 64 reached a messy climax. With a showdown and no vote in the country's normally dignified National Assembly. Retirement age in many European countries is already over 65. Yet French workers cling tenaciously to something they cherish, and the fight to save it may not be over yet, Omar.
All right, Paul, thank you. Back here at home, Canada's two largest opposition parties took aim at the Prime Minister's pick of the new special rapporteur on election meddling, just as a new report of possible foreign interference surfaced. Here's CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver.
The latest allegation goes back to the 2022 Vancouver municipal election. And today, the city's current mayor, Ken Sim, a Chinese Canadian, rejected a report in the Globe and Mail that the Chinese consulate there meddled to boost the chances of a pro-Beijing candidate.
If I was a Caucasian male, we're not having this conversation.
Sim beat Kennedy Stewart, Vancouver's former mayor, who says he was briefed on the allegations of interference by CSIS before the election.
There was information that they had that wasn't getting through to upper levels, and they thought it was important that people knew what was happening, or at least had some sense that something was happening.
CSIS says it takes foreign interference seriously, but won't comment further. The latest developments come as the opposition reacted today to the Prime Minister's appointment of David Johnston as special rapporteur.
I have nothing against him. I just think that the Prime Minister should promote his own credibility by picking people who are not, from the very beginning, friends of him.
Johnson was appointed Governor General by a Conservative Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. But Conservative MPs are now criticizing him in a coordinated online campaign. We've seen a pattern of Trudeau's foundation experts used to deliver favorable outcomes for the government, this Ontario MP wrote. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre also pointed out Johnston's links to the Trudeau Foundation.
But that's what it is. It's a political campaign. They're going all out because they're the opposition, and this is the Prime Minister's appointment, and they oppose him.
Johnston is a member of the Trudeau Foundation charity honoring the late Pierre Elliott Trudeau that says it is independent and nonpartisan. In 2016, before Johnson joined, the foundation received a $200,000 donation from a Beijing-linked donor. The money was returned earlier this month.
Mr. Johnson is someone of strong reputation, of integrity, and he is someone that's independent and nonpartisan.
Elections BC says it is reviewing campaign financing disclosure from last year's municipal election and will investigate, Omar, if it sees any evidence of foreign funding.
Annie Bergeron-Oliver in Ottawa, where the government will drop mandatory COVID tests for air travelers coming from China, Hong Kong and Macau starting tomorrow. Canada reintroduced temporary measures in January when China saw a resurgence of the virus. And the pandemic has resulted in massive burnout for frontline workers in hospitals, prompting some to leave altogether. And that's part of what's creating a major shortage of nurses. Here's CTV's Atlantic Bureau Chief Chris Najgate on a prescription that is a Canadian first.
As pandemic fatigue plagues Canada's healthcare system, today Nova Scotia's nursing regulator announced a solution.
Increase the speed of their licensure, decrease the paperwork that's involved.
The province is cutting wait times for licensed registered nurses from 7 countries to practice here. All they will need is to pass the national entrance exam.
Every one of those nurses licensed in those countries have a very similar scope of practice to a nurse scope of practice in Nova Scotia.
Starting May 1st, applications will be processed in as little as 3 weeks compared to 1 year it took previously. And for nurses from other provinces, it will only take up to 24 hours beginning March 29th.
How can there be nurses and physicians and others, driving taxi cabs, working in restaurants? That made no sense to people.
Joanna Eloise Sig's journey to become a registered nurse in Canada wasn't easy. She remembers growing up in the slums of the Philippines.
I was faced into the reality of life that I really need to step up for my family.
She says the new measures tear down the hurdles she faced.
If it makes things easy for everyone, then a lot of people would come here to find, to fill the need of the nursing profession.
Other provinces are working towards similar licensing measures. In Ontario, international educated nurses are being allowed to practice while working towards full registration.
If you recruit, make sure that you have strategies for retentions.
According to Stats Canada, more than 32,000 nursing positions were vacant in 2021. Officials say one of the strategies for retention should be improved working conditions. Omar.
All right, Creason, thank you. Coming up, Canada's biggest zoo goes into protection mode.
We're not willing to take that chance.
The pavilion's off limits due to bird flu fears. Plus,
there's always a surprise.
Sage words at an epic birthday celebration. Tremors were felt as far away as Edmonton this morning from a series of quakes about 500 kilometers away. Measuring around 4.6 on the Richter scale, 3 earthquakes struck near Peace River in northwestern Alberta in a span of 25 minutes. Fortunately, no injuries or damage. Thousands of school kids are off this week, and those going to the Toronto Zoo are noticing a major difference because of an avian flu case at a southern Ontario poultry farm. CTV's Kevin Gallagher explains.
As March break crowds hit the Toronto Zoo, bird lovers will be forced to keep their distance as aviaries where guests can get close are off limits.
So this way's closed, okay?
It's a little disappointing for sure.
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency detected avian flu at a poultry farm within 200 kilometers of the zoo. And though it's not a food safety concern, the zoo says there is a risk to its birds.
A number of our guests could be coming in from poultry farms from those areas, and we're not willing to take that chance.
People can unknowingly carry bird flu on their clothes or shoes. Migrating birds like Canada geese can also leave behind infectious droppings as well.
So the concern here is if people step on some goose poop and that gets on a pathway that can be shared by a bird, that can potentially infect.
That's one of our biggest concerns here.
John Spiro is the lead bird keeper at the Toronto Zoo and says this year's strain is especially nasty.
This strain has mutated. We're seeing it in more wild bird species.
This year, infections in mammals are on the rise. 8 skunks in BC were killed by the virus, likely after scavenging wild birds. And even in Peru, hundreds of infected sea lions have washed up dead. While cases in people can be deadly, it's extremely rare.
But in general, it seems to be a very low risk for people. And even for hunters that are potentially shooting ducks and geese, as long as they are taking precautions, cooking the meat before they consume it, it should be okay.
Back at the zoo, staff hope the precautions will keep their flock safe and that bird flu season passes soon. Kevin Gallagher, CTV News, Toronto.
A captivating showdown caught on camera in the animal kingdom proves that sometimes you just got to stare down your enemies, even if they are more powerful. An alligator popped out of a pond hoping to make a meal out of a sandhill crane. But the bird had other ideas, spreading its wings to appear bigger, even chirping. The gator eventually turned around and went back in the water. So satisfying when the underdog wins. Coming up.
A lot of these kids don't realize that how many First Nation players that played in the National Hockey League.
Former NHLers help the young stars of tomorrow. For the first time since the pandemic began, thousands of young players are competing in Canada's largest Indigenous hockey tournament, a popular tradition that involves former NHL stars as mentors. High-profile examples of what players can aspire to, as CTV's Donna Sound shows us in tonight's Indigenous Circle.
At a time when many families head south for the heat, these hockey families want to be at the rink. This is the Little NHL, or Native Hockey League.
It's what we do. It's been our March break since I was a kid.
Talon Bokaj plays defense for the Nipissing Warriors.
Played a couple games this tournament, lost a couple, but that's not what it's about. You know, it's always been about just coming and, you know, meeting all these people.
184 teams from across Ontario made the trek to Mississauga. More than 44 First Nation communities are represented here. You ready? What makes this special for these kids is not only the camaraderie, but the Indigenous NHL alumni who come to cheer them on and even coach. One more. Former NHL star Reggie Leach is from the Barons River First Nation in Manitoba. He's a Conn Smythe Trophy winner who also captured the Stanley Cup in 1975 with the Philadelphia Flyers.
A lot of these kids don't realize that how many First Nation players that played in the National Hockey League.
The tournament is in its 49th year.
And we promote 4 pillars. Respect is a key one, education is a key one, sportsmanship and citizenship.
Each year, a different community hosts. It's the Nipissing First Nation this year. Their ambassador is Dan Frowley, a former captain for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He played at this tournament when he was a kid.
I would come here and play and just had so much fun that when I went back to my other team, you know, I was a better player because of the experience.
An experience the kids here hope to follow, encouraging them to dream big, but mostly enjoy the game. Donna Sound, CTV News, Mississauga.
And after the break, a milestone birthday celebration in Montreal. If you're looking for the secret to a long life, just ask Margaret Romans, and she should know. Today, she celebrated her 111th birthday. CTV's Vanessa Lee on what keeps her going.
Happy birthday, dear Margaret. A milestone celebration in honor of Margaret Romans, who has seen more than most of us could ever dream of. The life she has lived is nothing short of extraordinary. Born in Latvia, she survived 2 world wars. There were bombings on the day she exchanged vows with her husband Heinrich in 1941 during the Soviet occupation. They fled and eventually settled in Montreal, where she planted roots as an art teacher.
One of my students, I said I had no friend. She said, I will be your friend. And she lived with a close friend until she died.
The friends that surround her today are ones she has shared a bond with for decades. Others are gone, including the love of her life. While her body has slowed, her mind is as sharp as ever. She lived on her own until 4 years ago, when she was 107. Is it what you eat? Is it exercise?
I'm interested in everything. There's always something you want to see, and that makes you want to live. There's always a surprise, and that makes life interesting.
You're a superstar, Gigi. That insatiable quest to learn something new every day inspires everyone around her. A remarkable woman who still has so much to share. Vanessa Lee, CTV News, Montreal.
You can tell she loved that cake. And here's to many more, Margaret. Happy birthday. That's a snapshot of this Thursday. John Benavelli Rao will be here tomorrow for all of us at CTV National News. Good night.